Happy Saturday morning, guys. This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports, and we are working on one of our 363 builds for Mr. Ron. Dart block and scat steel crank, scat I-beam rods, and these custom Male pistons, which are really nice. If you didn't see the block comparison from yesterday, you may want to hop on over and check that out. We looked at our World Products block and our Dart block, showed the differences. But I'm waiting on rod bearings. So the rod bearing clearances were about a half a thou too tight, and I was all out of X bearings. So I got those coming. But while we are waiting for those, I can go ahead and get the camshaft agreed and the piston valve clearance checked and all that good stuff. This episode is going to be cam degreeing. So I want to walk you through everything from the very beginning to the very end. And hopefully this will help you out. So let's just start from the very beginning. Why do we degree cams? So when cams are ordered, they have a specific amount of specs: the duration, the lift, the lobe separation angle, intake center line. People make mistakes. Everybody's human. Sometimes even the CNC machines that they make the cams on are human, and the specs don't line up. So there's also tolerance stacking. So we're also looking at our timing set. What if the keyway in the crank gear was a little bit off? Or what if our crankshaft was indexed off just a little bit? So if you're just throwing your cam in and expecting it to be right, you're taking a gamble. So, you know, no cam manufacturer, no timing set manufacturer, no crankshaft manufacturer is immune from this. It's not a matter of quality. It's just checking things, okay? So you're checking to make sure the cam had been ground correctly, the timing set was machined correctly, the crankshaft machined correctly. I have seen combinations off 8 degrees. So I remember one specific engine, I had to advance the cam timing 8 degrees to make it right. So while we're talking here, it's very important that you use the right terminology when you're looking at cams and that sort of thing. People don't understand that when you say, I'm installing this straight up, that it means that the intake center line is the same as the exhaust center line and the lobe separation angle. So I have a lot of cams ground with advance in it. People, customers, who whatever noun you want to use there, they think that when the dots line up on your timing gears, that it means it's straight up. So I get all these emails saying I've got the cam in there straight up. And that is not the case, usually. Straight up is 0 advance, 0 retard. This cam has, let me look at the cam card right fast. It has 3 degrees of advance built into it. So when I put the gears dot to dot, and if everything is made correctly, it'll have 3 degrees of advance in it. If I wanted this cam to be straight up, I would retard it 3 degrees so that this cam is on a 111 lobe separation angle. So if I wanted it straight up, it would mean that the lobe separation angle is 111, the intake center line is 111, and by math, the exhaust center line is 111. So a lot of people get that wrong, including engine builders. You wouldn't believe the amount of engine builders that mess that up. So don't mess that up. All right, so the very first thing that we have to do to degree a cam, everything relies on this right here. We have to start off with the degree wheel, making sure that we have top dead center correctly. If you don't have top dead center correctly, everything else is wrong. So you take a step at the very beginning to make sure that that is right. What I do is I check it a couple different ways. So I use a deck bridge and I roll the engine over until the piston's at top dead center. You can do this with the rings off. You can do it with the rings on. Just know that if you do it with the rings completely off, that you need to be as close to center on the wrist pin as you can. Otherwise you get some, I mean, even this will have some rock in it with the rings on it. I don't know if you can hear it there, but you can see it. So check it, bring it to top dead center. I usually go ahead and set my degree wheel to 0. While we're talking here, all of your fixturing and your tools have to be rigid, okay? If you've got stuff that's kind of janky and mounted with duct tape and rubber bands, your measurements are going to be off. Magnetic bases, you'll see what I use here for a fixture in a second for my dial indicator. Has to be rigid, it can't move. So, got my piston at top dead center. I think that's pretty close. I'm gonna mark it right here. I'm gonna roll this engine over so that the piston is down below the deck surface. And then I'm gonna mount my piston stop, and we're gonna check it with a piston stop. All right, we've got our piston stop mounted. This real cool guy named Brent Lykins makes these. They are Ford friendly. So if you buy a deck mounted piston stop from Summit or Jags or whoever, they're probably going to be made for a Chevrolet, and they won't span all the way across on a Ford. This one will work on any Ford engine, obviously not modular, but any single cam mounted in the tunnel type engines. Even got holes big enough for a 9/16 bolt for you big block Ford guys. So once that is mounted in place, tightened down, sorry my finger was in the way, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to try to get it, see the piston moving down. I'm going to bring that back up until it touches. Bonk. We are at 5, 6, 7 degrees. Okay, I'm going to go all the way around. We're at 9 degrees. But I gave you a lecture on making sure that your fixturing was rigid. And what happened was, when I was rolling this around, this stupid degree wheel, it's huge and it's got a lot of run out in it. It contacted my my pointer and it pushed it out of the way. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna have to do all this again and I'll get right back to you. All right, I am back. So we're gonna do the same thing again. We're gonna go up until piston touches. That's a solid stop. We've got 5, 6, 7 degrees. I'm going all the way back the opposite direction. And we're coming up. So my pointer should point at 7, right? If this thing is perfectly zeroed, then it should stop at 7. We'll see. It stopped at 8. So I'm a ½ degree off, okay? The difference between 7 and 8 is a degree. You split the difference. So I'm gonna move this wheel, to 7.5. And then I'm gonna go, so I was turning clockwise direction. I'm going to go counterclockwise. So I should be pretty close to where I need to be. Seven and a half. So we have found top dead center perfectly, and I'm gonna lock everything down to make sure it doesn't move. Our piston stop is gonna come off, and I know from here on out that the very first thing that we do, top dead center is found. I know it's gonna be right. Everything else following should be right. All right, the next thing that you need is a plethora, or not a plethora, it's kind of a misnomer. You need some solid lifters. This is a OEM style hydraulic roller lifter, and I have shimmed it up so that it's solid. You don't want any hydraulic lifters. This is also a solid roller lifter. You don't want any hydraulic lifters in here because the plunger can move, and that will obviously throw off your measuring. So solid lifters, and then you need a good rigid mount for a dial indicator to indicate off of your lifter. So I'll show you what I've got. All right, so I believe this came from Comp Cams. I can't remember, it's been forever since I've bought it, but just a nice rigid setup. You need a good dial indicator with an extension on it, and pretty sure Comp Cams makes this. Mine's well used, so it's been around here a long time. So you get this up in the air, mounted. We're going to figure out which one we're going to do first. So let's do our intake on a small block Ford. The first lifter that you come to from the front is a intake lifter. So we want this to start on the base circle of the cam. So no business going on with the cam. It's just on the back side of the lobe. Nothing's going on. So we want to ensure that we get to that point. So we do that. Remember the Evo method. When this exhaust lifter starts to go up, then we can set our setup on the intake side. So when that lifter starts to move, let me get my breaker bar off my arm. Come on, sweet girl. Oh, there we go. So exhaust is going up. Now I can reposition my dial indicator and all this on this intake lifter. Let me get that set up. All right, here's how your fixturing should be set up, okay? You should have plenty of travel for your lifter coming up. You should have your indicator point directly in the axis of your lifter. See, I can push that up and it hits right in the push rod cup on that lifter every single time. A rigid mounting system, everything is locked down. We got all three of our locks locked down. And I'm on the intake side. All right, so we have ensured that our fixturing is rigid. My intake lobe is on the heel, the base circle of the cam. So what I like to do first is zero my dial indicator and check the amount of lobe lift that we have. So I was getting ready to say, I like to hold my finger on the plunger just to make sure that everything stays rigid. So we're zero. I'm gonna go over, I'm gonna rotate. There's 1, 2, 3. We're gonna keep rotating until it stops. 20, 30, 40. And it stopped at 340, a little over 343. All right, so we found our lobe lift, and there's two methods to degreeing a cam. One is called the intake centerline method. The other is the valve event method. I generally like to do both, and I'll show you how to do both. But the intake centerline method is essentially, I'm not an artist. There's a lobe. So you're wanting to find where this point is in relation to basically the crankshaft, okay? The way that you do that is finding a point on each side, averaging the two, okay? So you go to where the lobe is peaked, you back up, then you go forward, and then you average the two. All right, so we talked about the two methods of degreeing the cam. You have the intake centerline method, which you're basically finding or attempting to find the middle point of the lobe. And then there's also the valve event method, which to me is more accurate, and I'll show you why here in a second. But we're going to go through both ways, and we'll record the differences for each one. So let's see where we're at here. I want to make sure our exhaust lifter is going up, and it is. So that means we're on the base circle of the cam. Our dial indicator is zeroed. I'm going to go and I'm going to find the peak of that intake lobe. So there's 1, 2, 3. I know that we had 343 and some change lobe lift, so I'm going to get it to there. Bonk. Then I'm going to center or zero my dial indicator. Okay, so we are at the peak of that intake lobe. The intake centerline method basically assumes that each side of the peak of the lobe are shaped the same. And what we're going to do is we're going to find a measurement, roughly 50 thousandths on each side of that peak, and we're going to average it, and then we're going to get our intake centerline number from that. So I'm at the peak. I'm going to back up 50 thousandths. Okay. And we are at 65 on our degree wheel. Okay, then I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to make sure it goes to 0, which it does not. Okay, this is real life indicator stuff here, so it needs to go back to 0. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to get that one-sided number. Okay, so I'm going to look at my degree wheel again, and we are roughly 64 and some change. Okay, so I'm going to call it 64 from my viewpoint. So I'm going to go back up here. I want to make sure it goes to 0, and it does. I'm going to keep on going because we're crossing the pinnacle, the peak of that lobe, and I'm going to stop at 50 thousandths. And we are at 149. All right, so I'm not a super duper artist, but what we're trying to find out is where this peak is right here. What we've done is we've snagged a degree there and a degree there, and assuming that this lobe is symmetric, if we add 149 and 64, we get 213. If we divide that by 2, then we get 106.5. Our intake center line on this custom camshaft is 108, so we are a degree and a half off. Let's show you the event method here, and we'll change up our setup, and then I'll show you why the event method is more accurate than the intake centerline method. All right, so valve event method should have 4 recorded points: your intake valve opening, your intake valve closing, your exhaust valve opening, and your exhaust valve closing. We're going to go through each one of those. I'm going to roll the engine over until that exhaust lifter starts to come up. I can see it. I'm looking at my dial indicator. It is perfectly on 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll the engine over in direction of normal rotation until that lifter is up 50 thousandths. And that's where you get your IVO event. Now, if you look at your degree wheel, mine is just a hair to the right of that 3 degree mark. So I want to record that as like, I don't know, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3. All right. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to keep rolling in direction of normal engine rotation. There's 100 thousandths, there's 200 thousandths, there's 3. We should have 343 lobe lift, and we do. Okay, we're going back down the other side of it now. There's 3, there's 2, there's 1, and I'm going to stop at 50. So this will be our intake valve closing event. And if we look at our degree wheel, I'm setting just on the right side of that 40 degree mark. So like 39 and 8 or something like that. So let's look at our cam card. So you can see there are 2 sets of measurements here. If you want to follow the intake centerline method, then you should be trying to match this 108 intake centerline. If we want to look at our valve event method, here's the valve events for that. Our intake opening should be at 3.4. I recorded at like 3. It was so close there that I couldn't really see it. Our intake closing event should be at 39.6, and I recorded a 39.8. So this is why you look at both methods, and I'll explain to you why you do that here in a second. If we were to just follow the intake centerline method, remember we were on a 106.5 intake centerline when we should have been on a 108. But by the valve event method, we are pretty much dead on. Okay, you really can't get much closer than that. It's not like I can change my crank gear and pick up 0.4 degrees. Okay, the cam gear is in 2 degree increments. So the reason, well, I'll show you the lobe catalog here in a second, and I'll tell you why I think that the valve event method is more accurate for this cam than the intake centerline method. Right now we're going to switch our all of our fixturing over. We're going to go to the exhaust side, and we're going to check our exhaust numbers. All right, so I'm going to get all this stuff out of the way. I'm going to swap my lifters. And I'm going to reposition everything. But for us to make sure that the exhaust lifter is on the heel of the lobe, remember we have to rotate the engine until our intake lifter opens or rises. There it is, and then it needs to start down because the EVO method is intake valve closing. So it's closing. And now I know for a fact that this lifter is on the heel of the cam lobe. So I'm going to set all my stuff here and lock it down. All right, I've got plenty of travel on my plunger, and then I'm going to tweak it so that I know that the plunger is sitting right on the push rod seat of the lifter. All right, so same deal. I'm going to find my lobe lift. I'll roll the engine over. There's 1, 2, 3, 320, 330, 340. So we're at 344 on that one. All right. So first we're gonna do the exhaust center line, just like the intake center line, but it's gonna be the exhaust side. So we're gonna find that peak of that lobe and then measure each side of it. So we're at the peak. I'm gonna zero my dial indicator, and now I'm gonna back up, and we're gonna back it up to 50 thousandths. And our first number is a 158. So I'm gonna record 158. Okay, then I'm gonna roll the engine over normal direction. Our dial indicator should go to 0, and it does not. So that should be a indicator that something isn't right. That happens. Okay, it's not the world does not end. So I'm gonna tweak it, get it on 0. I'm gonna check that first number that we just did, and it's 158 still, okay? And then I'm gonna go back. There's the peak of the lobe, it's at 0. I'm gonna keep on going. We're going down the other side of the lobe now. Okay, there's 50, and we are at about 71. All right, so I recorded those two numbers. We got 229, and we're gonna average that. So 114.5, right? Yeah. Okay. So here's one quick check that you can do, okay? Intake center line plus exhaust center line equals your LSA. So we'll just do this for giggles. 114.5, 106.5. It's 221. Our lobe separation angle is half that, so if I do the half, 110.5. So if we use all of the center line methods, then our intake center line is measured at 106.5, our exhaust center line is measured at 114.5, and our lobe separation angle is 110.5. So now we're going to do the exhaust side with the valve event method and check it. All right, so valve event method for the exhaust side. Remember, we need to get our exhaust lifter to the heel of the lobe. We're going to double check that. Our intake lifter is coming up and it's going back down. So this means that our exhaust lifter is on the heel. I'm going to zero my dial indicator. Okay. So we're just going to measure the first event, which is our Evo. So we're going to go to 50 thousandths. Okay, we're going to look at our degree wheel, and we are at 46, 47. Oh, we're splitting hairs here. So about 47 and a half. And we'll record that. And then we're going to keep on going on our dial indicator. So there's 100, 200, 300, 344. We're going back down. There's 300, 200, 100. We're going to stop at 50. Okay. We're going to look at our degree wheel. And we are at basically a half a degree. All right. So I recorded all these numbers. Our exhaust valve opening was 47.5. It's supposed to be 47.4, so we were a tenth off. Our exhaust valve closing was 0.5. It's supposed to be 0.4. So here's why you can do the two methods. By the centerline method, our intake centerline was off, and our lobe separation angle was off by half a degree or so. But by the valve event method, this cam is dead on to what it should be. So that's why you do both methods, and check out everything against your cam card. All right, so we're going to talk about why one method may be more accurate than another method. This is CompCam's lobe catalog, so this is how a lot of us choose camshafts. Look at the extensive lobe catalog that they have. I mean, just all kinds of stuff in here, all kinds of goodies. So we're going to look at hydraulic roller stuff. If you notice, we got all this information over here to the left, and Tri-Power Extreme, rated duration at 6,000 tappet lift, hydraulic roller journal, Juliet, Sierra, Bravo, Romeo. The intensity is 27.1, and then we got these two sets of numbers in parentheses. So 13.3 and 13.8. Those numbers are an indicator of how quick the valve opening is and the valve closing is. So opens on the left, closes on the right. So you can think through this in your head. What side would you generally want the highest velocity or acceleration to be? And that would be the opening side. It's easier on parts if you open a valve quickly as compared to slamming it down on the seat quickly. So on a lot of these cams, you'll see this intake opening side a little bit more quicker, aggressive than the closing side. You'll also notice that they're not the same numbers. So if they're not the same numbers, that dictates it's an asymmetrical lobe, okay? So let's fly through here and see if we can find a couple that are the same. Hold on a minute. I should have done this off camera. Let's look at some of the older flat tappet lobes. Some of these don't even. Okay, we got this race hydraulic lobe here at the bottom of the screen. So 25.8, intensity 12.9, 12.9. I would be fairly confident that I could use the intake centerline method on that lobe. 11.1, 11.8, so a little quicker opening on extreme energy. Same with the XFI lobes. So this particular cam that we're working on with Mr. Ron's engine is a, I'll scroll down here. It's an HUC lobe. And the HUC lobes are quicker on the opening side than the closing side. So the valve event method proved to be more accurate for us in that regard. If we hop over to Bullets, lobe catalog, we'll look at hydraulic roller stuff. Here's their catalog. It's laid out differently. There's not as much information there, but on the right hand side, you'll see this CRA, CRS. Those are asymmetrical or symmetrical. So that's how you can tell if how the lobe is shaped that way. So on this page, it gives us the how to read, kind of like a guide on how to read that, a legend. So if we look at this lobe type explanation, the third letter is either S for symmetrical lobes, opening and closing ramps the same, or A for asymmetrical lobes, opening and closing ramps different. Asymmetrical lobes usually have a slower closing rate to help prevent valve bounce, which is what we were talking about on Comp Cam's catalog. Alright, so we're going to get to this part of the video where we've had lots of cam discussions, and you know, Eric Weingartner's got this cam challenge thing going on, so you've got multiple YouTube users who have their own channels, and they're, you know, talking about this and that. Y'all just need to calm down. It's a lot of the people reading the comments and watching the videos and everything. This is cam stuff. This isn't politics or religion. So you don't have to get wadded up about, you know, so and so said LSA is important, and so said, you know, LSA isn't important. My goodness. So one fun note that I'll make is how many NASCAR engine builders there are. So all these comments that are popping up on my channel, and all these guys saying, hey, I used to run a shop, I used to be a NASCAR engine builder. So I didn't know that there were that many NASCAR engine builders. Let me just say, don't let your egos get you in trouble, because for some reason choosing cams is, I don't know, people get straight up hateful about choosing cams and the theory and all this stuff. So let me just say, calm your all selves down and watch, you know, the videos, watch the channels, pay attention to Eric Weingartner's stuff going on. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to win it. I can pretty much promise you that I'm not going to win it, just because I don't have any experience at all with the LS stuff, and I don't know how much overlap that Eric's heads require. I don't, you know, the valve train stuff is foreign to me, so I'm doing it for the data, because there's going to be about 20 guys with cams in there, and we're going to get to see all the specs, and we're going to get to see what does what. So over the last 15 years that I've been, you know, selling custom cams and everything, you know, I do my own dyno testing and do different things, swap cams, you know, multiple cams in a day. I've tried to get a handle on what's the best camshaft for a particular combination and everything, and but that's Ford stuff. That's mainly Ford FE stuff and small block stuff, and I just have zero LS experience. So this is just a fun exercise for me. But for everybody else listening and watching the videos, just chill out and calm down and stop the arguing and the fighting and everything else. So with that being said, this is Brent with Lykins Motorsports, and I hope you guys are having a good week and a good weekend. We've got a lot done on Mr. Ron's engine build. I have I checked piston and valve clearance this morning, and I'm just waiting on rod bearings, and then we can continue on. So I've been trying to keep it a little easier on my back, and all these Ford, small block Ford builds that I have going on, all three of them have cast iron cylinder heads, and it's been a chunk, so I've had to be careful, but we're making progress, and that's good. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Subscribe to the channel. It's good stuff. Talk to you soon.